welcome to another episode of Ugh, As If, Contemporary Art Podcast with me, Lisa Fevral, and today we're going to talk about the new Gossip Girl remake, and it's probably going to be a little bit louder today in the background than usual, mostly because I'm not filming really late at night, which I usually do for the podcast because I live on a very busy street, so I'm sorry about that, but I have been really low on energy recently due to being sick with God knows what. I'm trying to figure out what it is, but it's taking a really long time. Like, it's been 2 months already, and I'm still waiting for an appointment for a biopsy to be made. Basically, I'm falling apart physically. So this is, I have to do a podcast whenever I have even a shred of energy, just so I can deliver what I need to talk about, you know? So today we're gonna talk about Gossip Girl and David Wojnarowicz. It's a weird combination, I know. But the reason for that combination is the fact that in the Halloween episode of Gossip Girl, there was a costume that one of the main characters wore, which was a reference to Wojnarowicz's work, which is extremely relevant for New York scene because Wojnarowicz primarily worked in New York, and that's why we're going to talk about him today.
Will I be nervous if I'm chosen to be on the show? No. Why should I be? I am extremely comfortable being on national television.
So I've asked you guys about your unpopular opinions about Gossip Girl, about the reboot, and a lot of points that people have made were, for example, from Amber Scaife. Personally, I'm really mixed on the reboot because on one hand, it's not terrible and it keeps me invested enough to want to watch another episode, but on the other hand, the writing makes some of the storylines, like the love triangle between Zoya, Julian, and Obi, feel a bit too try-hard. I'm also not understanding why they're on a hiatus after only a few weeks of it being on. I mean, I keep on watching it, but it's not because I want to. I feel like it's partially the fact that I kind of am used to keeping up with Gossip Girl stuff. I did not like the last 2 seasons, at least the last 2 seasons of the OG Gossip Girl, but I still watched it, you know. So I feel like I'm not watching it due to some kind of merit of the show as much as I'm watching it just for the sake of knowing what happens. I skip a lot too. If I know what's gonna happen, I kind of skip a bit so it finally happens instead of me waiting for it to happen. I definitely agree that Zoya, Julian, and Obi, it's such a messy situation, and I mean, it's kind of part of the fun that it's messy, right? But it's not fun because they have no chemistry. In the last episode, at least, it made more sense. By the way, spoilers up to the point of what has been released. It's just really boring. I didn't feel like there was any chemistry between Zoya and Obi. I don't think that there is any between Julian and Obi. There's more between Julian and Obi than Zoe and Obi, but still. And also, it always makes me uncomfortable, just the fact that Zoya is 14. She's so young. I mean, it's not that it's super uncomfortable because technically Obi is supposed to be 16, 17? Are they supposed to be older? I don't know. In any case, it's just not interesting. It's really boring. None of the people in the cast have any chemistry. I mean, Max, Audrey, and Aki, they're more interesting only when they're together, when it's the 3 of them instead of any combination of the 2, you know. But even then, it's still very it falls flat. I don't know. It's very much the problem of either not having chemistry in the cast or the writing. I think it's kind of a combination of everything. Let me see, because I wrote down a few notes. So first of all, I don't find any of them likable. And I know that partially it's because I'm not really in the mood to be watching any rich kids being rich, you know. But at the same time, I feel in the original, because there was a lot more humor and a lot more emphasis on how ridiculous they are, I had more empathy for them just because they weren't trying to be something that they are not. There was a lot, I guess that's why I didn't like Dan that much, is because he was one of those characters that was trying to be something that he isn't, you know, pretending to be poor, always complaining about shit and whatever, when he has so many opportunities and whatnot, you know. I think that's mostly what's bothering me about all of them and about him in particular, and about all the new characters in the reboot, you know. Audrey is kind of spoiled, and it's more like in line with what the OG Gossip Girl was about, but at the same time I feel like they should have made them funnier. Like there was a couple moments when they were actually funny and their behavior was kind of funny, especially Audrey, you know, like how ridiculous she is. And that's when it was more enjoyable because she's ridiculous, she is, you know, and when the show is taking her too seriously, it's when I kind of draw the line, you know. That moment at the hospital where she found out about her mom and then she turns around to the crew and then looks back at the doctor, like that whole scene was just so cringe-worthy. I was literally just quaking. I couldn't deal with it. Another thing that I wrote down is that the fact that this new Gossip Girl is set in like 2021 or something like that, after the pandemic, the way that it's like, I don't know, it's just such a strange thing. I wish they just omitted the whole thing, because I don't think that it fits the narrative or fits the theme of the show that well, you know, as the setting. It doesn't really seem to make any sense, especially because it's not really used for anything, because there's no, like, rich people are not affected by anything. They're not affected by the pandemic, they're not affected by climate change. If you have money, you're not affected by anything really, in terms of global human issues that are kind of societal issues or economic issues and stuff like that. You're usually on the outside of all of those problems. Just look at the Kardashians or anybody else. They've got no regard for whatever is going on right now, and they haven't felt it. Even if they say that they have, it's all just, you know, for show. So I wish they just they wouldn't use it at all. Another point, don't really like teachers being the Gossip Girl because there's no moral gray area there. If it's a student, then it's like students dealing with students. They're at the same kind of level of authority to each other and to everyone else. It would make a lot more sense if it was some other student and stuff like that, just because in that case you feel like there's more of a gray area there, you know. In this case, I have no sympathy for the teachers. And you kind of have to have a bit of a sympathy for Gossip Girl to understand why it's happening, and like to kind of sometimes be on Gossip Girl's side and sometimes be on the side of the main characters. I think that was the best part about the original Gossip Girl, is that regardless of who it was, you kind of felt like sometimes you were on Gossip Girl's side. You wanted them to get exposed for something, you know. In this case, it just feels wrong all around. Another thing is I hate Obi. I don't understand. I don't think that his character has enough redeeming qualities. He went for the sister, for a younger sister, a sister that she just got back in her life. It was a very quick kind of getting together, a little bit too much. Another thing about their relationship, about Obi and Zoya, I kind of would write it off as like Zoya being a child, like she's literally 14, that's why she's not communicating. But it was such a lazy way to show cracks in their relationship before the dinner, because the dinner I think was like a really good example of why they wouldn't get along, because he's a coward and he's also just very performative about his involvement in any type of issues, to compare it to Zoya that's more like naive and a little bit more maximalistic about her approach, you know, but still at least more honest about it. I feel like that dinner made sense, right? Like to show why they don't fit and whatever. But it didn't make sense before then that she stopped talking to him, that she was kind of considering another guy all of a sudden. The way that they were handling their relationship made no sense, because it's like, well, you kind of made your sister very uncomfortable to go out with this guy, so you didn't like him at all and you did all that. I don't know, it just puts Zoya in a very bad light. It puts everyone but Julian in the bad light, you know. And even then, I think Aki and Audrey make barely any sense, mostly because they don't have any chemistry, the actors. I don't know what's wrong there. I don't know why they can't seem to be interested in each other. Maybe it's like the actor who plays Aki. He is quite stiff, but a lot of them are, to be honest. Like Audrey's kind of getting into her own, starting to be a little bit more of a interesting kind of character. But I think that Obi and Aki are kind of too bland to really love or hate, especially like Obi is kind of easier to hate because of his actions, but he is not a fleshed out character. They all seem very ephemeral in terms of who they are. They don't really have a lot to them, and of course that could be intentional. But you know, Zoya and Obi make no sense. Aki and Audrey make no sense. Monet, her behavior in that Halloween episode, I really don't get it. She's been said to be the richest one out of them all, right? So she's like filthy rich, and then she also has all this pull at the school. She has all this control. She's basically the reason why Gossip Girl was created for the second time and stuff like that. And yet she's so desperate for Julian's image to be a certain way, and she wants because she wants some certain opportunities. And it's like, let's be real, not a single person in their tax bracket puts any effort to actually be good at anything. Like, I don't know, have you ever met anybody who is even just remotely privileged? They don't usually put a lot of work into anything. They talk a lot. They sound like an art digest in terms of using a lot of flowery words that mean nothing, but they don't actually work hard or make a scene or jump ship for the sake of some kind of client or something. What is the point? She's so filthy rich. I would understand that maybe Julian would be a little bit more scared about her position and stuff like that, because even though she is rich, her dad is new money. He doesn't have that crazy connections that Monet has. She's super well connected and from a very rich family. That's been established from the very beginning. Her behavior makes absolutely no sense. The motivations, everything, it's just all over the place. I think that they should have thought about it a bit more when they went with this plot line. Luna is not bad. She's kind of fun. And I'm gonna tell you this. The reason why everything falls flat, if you were wondering, and why you're so bored, is lack of mystery. And I don't mean the mystery of Gossip Girl. Because a lot of people are like, well, I think it's because Gossip Girl was the main mystery and it doesn't exist anymore in this world, whatever. And I think that the original Gossip Girl, even in the first episode, gave you so many mysteries that it hooked you to watch and anticipate. Not just watch just because you need to see what happens, as some people do with the new Gigi, But it was mostly the amount of different types of hooks that were kind of given to you. Gossip Girl itself wasn't that big of a focus in terms of who Gossip Girl is. There was only a couple of episodes where people were trying to figure it out within the Gossip Girl universe, right? And it was maybe a season 1, a couple of episodes, or one episode, and then the last day of high school, right, when they were trying to figure it out as well. It genuinely wouldn't change much if we knew Gossip Girl from the beginning or not. Well, I mean, it would change some things because of course Dan was a random decision, but it wasn't the mystery wasn't the main plot line. It had nothing to do with the enjoyment of the show. And I think that what did have a lot to do with it is the amount of other mysteries that are surrounding it. The reason why Gossip Girl was so powerful is because they all had so many mysteries, so many secrets, and those secrets were effective. For example, the fact that Serena and Blair used to be such good friends, and Serena was kind of the queen bee, and then she just left out of nowhere, and the fact that you're kind of given all this information when Serena comes back and Blair is mad at her. She's not, so we're aware that something else happened. It wasn't just that she suddenly left. She didn't say goodbye. She did not keep in touch. Something happened that was bad enough that she couldn't even keep in touch with anybody. We find out about Nate, right? So we the first episode, I don't think we find out that about Nate and Serena right away, but I think that what we do find out in the first episode was the fact that Nate is kind of weirdly obsessed with her when Blair is right there and they're together, and they seem to be like moving on to like a new part of their relationship or something like that, you know. So you get that, you get their dad and Rufus's, issue with his wife. You know that the kids came back from their moms and the mom didn't come back. You're like, what the hell? So it's kind of like marital issues, but you don't know what the hell is going on technically, and the kids don't know either. Then you get Lily and Rufus. You get the mystery with what happened with Serena's brother and why he's in that hospital and why his mom is not letting him out. Oh, there was a lot that was just in the first episode where you kind of were like, well, what the hell happened between them that they're so salty about this or about that? And the best part about it is that it all paid off. When it comes to this new Gossip Girl, the only other mystery or secret that kind of happened was the fact that they are sisters, but it wasn't even a secret. It was kind of well known. They know that their parents don't get along. They know that they're sisters. There's just everything that they introduce is already resolved, and the drama that they create is very forced. It's not a reveal at the end of why this people are acting this way, because when you know what happened, all of a sudden all of the behavior makes sense in the first season of Gossip Girl, of the original. In this case, it's just kind of like they're trying to show everything in real time, but nothing interesting enough is happening. The characters are not written to be funny enough for it to be entertaining. It's not dramatic enough or mysterious enough to be entertaining, and I think that that's why it's kind of falling flat so much. It's not specifically that the plot lines or the characters are not like original or something or whatever. It's just the fact that they don't understand that what made the first one enjoyable was the fact that they structured it oftentimes. The best parts of Gossip Girl was structured like a bit of a mystery, because when we find out about Nate and Serena, it's still strange that she left so abruptly and people still don't know what happened. And then in the next season you find out that she literally thought that she K-worded somebody, and that's why she left like that. And it's like another big revelation, and it's another big thing, and it introduces Georgina, which is a real threat to Serena's life because of how manipulative and how much control she has over her and how much stuff she just has over her, stuff off her, like videos and other things like that she can use. So that's what was so entertaining about it. It's like they would always introduce a new thing, and sometimes I think that kind of the reason why it stopped being interesting after a while is because the characters can't keep on having interesting secrets forever. That's why it stopped being interesting after like 3 seasons, That's what made it work, I think, for the first 3 seasons, and that's what I think that they should have implemented into the new Gossip Girl, especially because the new Gossip Girl doesn't have as many episodes per season, so they could have had many seasons with less episodes that they could have kind of done in this way that would allow them to have more interesting plot lines. So a thing that I want to talk about here is this look that Max wore for the Halloween episode. I'm not sure if you remember it. I'm gonna describe it for those of you who don't watch the podcast, like if you just listen to it. It's basically Max wore this shirt that said "F me safely," which is a reference to Wojnarowicz piece or film, a still from his film. And with that in mind, let's move on to the art section and let's talk about Wojnarowicz.
Yeah, she's a full-on Monet. It's like the painting, see? From far away it's okay, but up close it's a big old mess.
David Wojnarowicz, he primarily practiced in New York City, and he's had a difficult life, mostly because of his upbringing. His parents being not really great parents, not at all, not even close to it. He didn't get along with them because of his sexual orientation. David Wojnarowicz was a gay man at the time where it was very dangerous to be gay in America. It's also he's also one of those artists that was truly on the outside of the contemporary art society, where he was when he was actually alive and operating in real time. He's worked in multimedia practices. He practiced in a lot of different mediums. He wasn't just in photography or just in film or in just painting. He's had a very turbulent life due to obviously struggling with homelessness because of his parents not supporting him, and because of his parents also not being able to even take care of themselves well. He had a abusive childhood, experienced homelessness, and been involved in prostitution. And one of the experiences of his life that have become famous about him is his AIDS diagnosis at the height of the crisis in America. That was around the 80s and 90s. A lot of his work at that time started to deal with a lot of these issues dealing with vilification of homosexuality in America, the dismissal of this endemic that was happening at the time. So one of the kind of important things about this piece that we're talking about, which is specifically a poster image for the film Rosa von Braunheim film, which is called Silence Equals Death, that was made in 1989. It's a little bit incorrect in terms of the way that they used it in Gossip Girl, in terms of putting this shirt that says F me safely on this character, while at the same time referencing this specific still from the movie, mostly because at that time Wojnarowicz was not yet working with a lot of AIDS themes in his work, or with illness in his work. However, I would say that it's not that important because he's really famous for that work. So it makes sense that they would kind of combine, his later works with his older ones to create this costume that Max wears in one of the episodes. Especially since they are set in New York, it makes sense that they would be referencing him. However, it's again a little bit ironic that a very rich kid that has everything and represents everything that Wojnarowicz wasn't afforded is wearing it. It's a little, it's a little ironic, but what are we gonna do about it? It's a rich kid. It's not like he's disrespecting anyone with this portrayal of Wojnarowicz, I guess. But let me know what you think about it. Do you think that it's kind of disrespectful, or that maybe David wouldn't like it? But I think that David is a really interesting artist, especially if you're interested in queer art, if you're interested in... Honestly, I'm not even specifically interested in queer art as much as I just think that he's kind of a really great artist. So regardless of whether you study queer art specifically, or if you're just into art, I think you should check out David's work. There's a lot of really interesting works that he's produced. There's some things for example, this film, Silence Equals Death, it was part of a bunch of other works that were for this organization called Act Up, which was for this organization that was trying to raise awareness for AIDS and raise awareness about the mistreatment of people with AIDS and all of these kinds of things. And his work was actually banned from the show, even though the show was all about these types of issues, because not because of this specific images or about talking about AIDS or something. It was because there was one scene in the movie where there's a plastic cross on the ground and it's covered in a bunch of ants, and basically a bunch of religious people got really offended in America, which is really funny. You don't get offended that your clergies are P words, but you're offended by this? Really? in any case, he was from a very religious family, so that's why he's made some references to religion in his work, because of very antagonistic relationship that the church has with LGBT community. I think what I like a lot about Wojnarowicz in general is the fact that he was working on his own against all odds. He kind of shaped the contemporary art society of 80s and 90s, regardless of all these institutions that were not accommodating, they were not helping. And that's kind of like a thing that always persists. You can see it even nowadays. Most of the artists that get featured, most of the people who get something are people who have the privilege, you know, to either know somebody or pay for it, to pay for their own shows or something, or people who have time. You know, time is a commodity that costs a lot. For example, if you're rich, you can just sit down and not do anything for weeks, months, years, just waiting for some kind of opportunity at a gallery show or something like that, and like it's afforded to you, this luxury of waiting, right? If you are not in that kind of, and not only waiting, but you can keep on working while you do that, and you can afford all those materials and other things like that. You can create work that looks more impressive to some gallery owners and to some people. Of course, it's all debatable because you can make art out of anything, but at the same time, not always, especially if it doesn't work with your concept. It's kind of a very dicey conversation, but David has been this powerhouse of creating art regardless of his situation, which he's talked about it in one of his videos. He's videotaped himself a lot speaking about things, and he's talked about how he can't really kind of keep himself from doing art because it helps him make sense of his existence, which is like, that's honestly the only reason why I go back to making art, honestly, because it's a silly thing, but you can't get rid of it sometimes just because life, it just makes no sense, and that's the only way you can make sense of it. And some of the works that I don't really hear a lot of people talk about when it comes to Wojnarowicz are his culture masks. People most of the time, like, they use those images for promotion, but they don't really talk about those images that much, and I kind of want to just talk about them. So just to describe the images themselves, it's basically a self-portrait. And by the way, I want to mention that because I've heard a lot of people say like, oh, usually people who I don't know, I feel like they don't know much about visual arts, maybe, I don't know, but some people say that oh, he's made a lot of self-portraiture and whatever, and it's so self-obsessive, he was making stuff about himself all the time, whatever. I don't know why they would think that, because I think that those artists that use themselves in their images are usually artists that are not really fond of the idea of exploiting others for their art. And I kind of respect that a lot more. I like when artists use their own bodies and they're using their own likeness and their own images to do the work that they're trying to do instead of exploiting others. I hate when people walk around taking pictures of homeless people and then call it art. That's weird. Same with like, I had a classmate who hired an escort or something like that and took a picture of her and whatever, and like that was his like art or something. I don't know. I genuinely don't like when people use others in their work. I know that you sometimes have to, but I try to avoid as much as possible, and I appreciate when artists do that too, when they use themselves to do all the crazy things that they want to do, instead of subjecting somebody else to it. But basically, it's a self-portrait. He's dressed as like somewhat of a mosquito, I would assume. This is kind of like something that I'm not entirely sure what kind of creature it's supposed to be, but he looks like a mosquito. He has this mask on with this map of the world, and this mosquito face looks like it's been, I don't know, it looks as ecstatic, as if it's like just had a bunch of blood, you know. So it has this like tube that's kind of like, the whatever it's called, needle of a mosquito, and it says culture on it. I believe that it's made out of money, like the tube itself, and also the collar around his face is also made out of money, and this is called a culture mask. In many ways, this is a critique of the contemporary art world that he was in, that was extremely elitist, extremely money obsessed, that was, I mean, honestly, it's not in the past. It's not, I can't say it was obsessed with money, or it was very elitist, or that it excluded people from narrative. It still does it, even with people like when we were talking about diversity and whatever. These institutions pick and choose people out of groups that can make them look more inclusive. So people who are, like, for example, a visible minority or something like that. But at the same time, they still pick them out of those few people who have an immense amount of wealth. It's not always the case, but it's oftentimes the case. And then what you get is a very weird kind of perspective in the arts world, where they pride themselves on this inclusivity, where in reality they don't actually have much of a different perspective in their circles, because once again, money is class is the ultimate definer of a human's life. You don't experience many different things that are negative in your immediate surroundings or in your society if you have money. I'm not saying about any other country, but I can speak for Russia, for example. That's why you get a lot of oligarchs, for example, like children of oligarchs in New York, for example. It's because, well, they came from somewhere, right? They came from doing the same capitalistic stuff in Russia and then coming over to America to enjoy the luxury of a first world country. So basically, I love Wojnarowicz for the fact that he was unabashedly angry. He was speaking about his anger. He literally said to just forget about burying him when he's dead from AIDS. Just put his body at the front doors of the White House. Let me actually see the quote exactly. I don't want to butcher it. So he said verbatim, "If I die of AIDS, forget burial. Just drop my body at the steps of the FDA." And when he died, I believe that it was his friend, or maybe it was his sister, someone who was close to him when he was alive. They used some of his ashes to throw them on the White House lawn or something like that. And because it was, again, a protest that was revolving around rights of people of all different capital in America, rights for just basic healthcare, right? And the right to be treated regardless of the fact that America didn't care about this endemic that was happening, because all the people that were affected at first were all from the LGBT community, specifically mostly gay people. So they kind of didn't care because of that, and that was like the main conflict at that time. Yeah, his work. I went to this gallery. I'm gonna link the description. This show that I went to at the Belkin art gallery. I liked the way that it was framed and everything. It was well done in terms of curatorial efforts. And I think that something about his work that can be really easily accessible to people is that he wasn't making art about his like gay experience as much as he was making art about his current feelings and about his raw conflict with the outside world, with this like this machine that was just spitting them out after using them up, this system that did not care and did not provide help to those that needed it. The fact that he was just making art about his real experience rather than speaking about himself as like some kind of asset, some kind of diversity asset, you know. His experience was just a human experience that he was trying to understand, rather than his experience was something that he could have leveraged for something in the contemporary art society, which is oftentimes the issue with some contemporary work that you see in the galleries right now of artists that are making art nowadays, is that they oftentimes make art specifically about one aspect of their identity and only focus on it. And even though, yes, a lot of his work was related to his sexuality, it was mostly related to it because he was interested in his human condition, and this was obviously part of his human condition. It wasn't that he was trying to... his art is universal, regardless of it being specifically so inspired by his very specific experience. It can be understood by many people, not just through people sympathizing with him or with his experience, but through true camaraderie of understanding that what he was struggling with was the human condition, and he was struggling to understand human negligence and ignorance and prejudice. And I think that's the big difference of like sometimes making art for the sake of filling a niche in the new market, and art that is genuinely coming from just human condition. And I think that it's hard sometimes as an artist. I'm not blaming those people that are kind of like, you know, working in this environment and they're making art that's very specific to, like, for example, their heritage or something like that. Like, I don't think that there's anything wrong about with making art like that, as much as I think that sometimes it can become can lead to very derivative art or very empty art, because at least in my case, like, I had a moment when I started to make art unconsciously. I was making art that would underline my unique experiences, to be seen by my peers and my colleagues as this asset, this person who can fill this niche, you know, these categories that they're looking for, when in reality that's not actually important. And I see that in a lot of my contemporary like peers, like the way that they speak of themselves. Oftentimes you don't have much about them anymore, like you don't really know a lot of substantial things about them in their work, as much as you get like this hollow representations of what they're supposed to be in this niche. I don't know if I'm poignant about it right now, like if I'm actually expressing myself well. Maybe I'll do another episode sometime when I'm going to be talking about this specifically. I've been thinking about it for a while, this difference between art that's about human condition, that's informed by your unique experiences, or not unique experiences, because honestly, like, we're not that unique as people, none of us are, or this other form of art where you're basically focusing on this marketing aspect of your art, of like, how do I fit into this new art society, or not new art, but this contemporary art society, what kind of niche I'm gonna be filling in, and what will the critics and the curators find attractive and interesting about my art. So this particular art, I forgot to mention that Max is referencing in his costume. This photograph, this still, is from the movie where Wojnarowicz, he's sewn his mouth shut with thread and needle, and it's like one of those artworks that kind of inspired a lot of artists in the future that were also talking about this type of censorship and other things like that were happening and that are still happening. But basically it's obviously about the painful experience of not being able to speak up about something and being silenced, but instead of it just being silenced like with a piece of tape over your mouth or something like that, it's a very painful and meticulous and structured form of silencing. In any case, this is David Wojnarowicz. Go check out the video in the description. That's of the gallery exhibition that I went to at the Belkin gallery. It's really good. It's not on right now, but they have this video where they went through the gallery and kind of talk about some of the pieces. There's a few pieces that are really interesting too that I think you should check out. He was a very prolific artist in terms of just having so many different art pieces that could be talked about in depth without repeating themes or repeating comments about the medium, because he was working in a lot of different mediums and media, I guess. And basically check it out. It's really nice. I'll see you guys soon, hopefully. I hope I'll have more energy soon. Let me know if you have any tips on how to help fatigue, because it's gonna take so long to get a goddamn diagnosis, and I don't know how to deal with the fatigue. And if you have any tips on how to deal with it, how to like get rid of it or something, or maybe, I know it's impossible to get rid of it, but maybe make it a little bit less difficult to deal with, please let me know. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.